Welcome back to Previously Prohibited. I'm Jenin Eunice here with my co-host Melissa Whitty, and today we have updates about Gaza, Trump, Netanyahu, everything. I believe Netanyahu is actually currently in D.C. in the same city as I am, which makes me sick. But anyway, we'll get into all of that. But first, Melissa, over to you.
Yeah, so thank you guys for coming and tuning in. If you could just hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We are growing on YouTube. We almost have 100 subscribers, so we're super excited about that. And if you could leave a comment, all of that really helps in the algorithm, and we really do appreciate it. And we do read all of the comments, so definitely thank you.
Have we risen to number 31 in New Zealand?
I haven't checked the Kiwi charts lately, but I will get on it because I will be super stoked if we can crack the top 10 in New Zealand,
yeah.
political podcasts. I will be ecstatic, and so yep, I will crowd raise so that I can get a get a ticket to fly down there. Okay. It was so funny. My parents are going to New Zealand, and my dad hinted at he wanted to fly first class. And I was like, I wonder how much it is from Raleigh to, New Zealand first class. Yeah. Guess how much it is, a ticket?
$20,000?
$25,000.
Yeah. Okay. The reason I know this is my best friend is Australian. He actually just moved back, and he flew first class. Because I think his company paid for it or something.
Okay.
So he told me the price. I think they actually fly to New Zealand first or something. So I was like, whoa.
Yeah, $25,000. I was
like some people's salary. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I was expecting it to be like 8, right? And so I was like, clearly my daddy hadn't looked at the prices yet, because I know him, and he is not dropping 25 G's on a plane ticket. So
yeah, right, 50, right? If it's both your parents,
right? Exactly. Yeah, my brother is in Guam, so they're going over there to visit. I'm like, can't y'all just like hop a military flight? Yeah, I think it's like $100 to do that. So, anyways,
So yeah, the Twitter is definitely breaking today with all of the Trump and Netanyahu news. The latest, for anyone who's not paying attention or is watching this at a different time than we're putting it out, the latest thing is that Trump said he's going to have America take over Gaza and rebuild it, and in the meantime, the people should go to Egypt or Jordan and maybe come back when it's rebuilt. I think it's a little unclear what the long-term strategy is, but people are mostly enraged on my Twitter, but
yeah. So on my Twitter, it's like this really dystopian mix of rage and this is 5D chess, and you just need to wait and see. It's like a, I don't know, probably a 60-20-20 mix of those three. And I learned today that Trump went and watched the like the silence of screams of silence, the October 7th video. So they had a
vote movie.
Yes,
the one that Sheryl Sandberg did.
Yes. So the one that, just so people know, that right after October 7th, the state of Israel put together, along with like Hollywood producers, they took all of this GoPro video, and then they did some reenactments, and then they did some video, some recordings of like phone calls and stuff like that people had made, and they put it into I think it's like an hour long, might be a little bit shorter than that, documentary, right, about October 7th. And it is highly scripted, and that's not to say that October 7th obviously was a very traumatic day. I don't think anybody could ever
Nobody's
take away
denying
from
that.
Nobody is denying that.
The claim I think we both make, and I think is quite clear if you actually look at the evidence, the real evidence, is that there was no mass rape strategy. Right. There were most likely some rapes, but the idea
definitely.
of like a systematic and these particularly brutal,
as a weapon of war.
Or as a and also like extremely brutal, like knives and vaginas stuff, and
right, just the really sick stuff that we saw, the grapes until the women's pelvises were breaking. That was all false.
That was all. I don't know if we've talked about it that much. I don't think we have, but my initial reaction when all of this came out was, um, I didn't want to deal with it because I was like, it doesn't matter if it's true or false. You can't just go and kill everyone in a civilian
Right.
population. Of
Right.
course, Israel is entitled to go find perpetrators of any of this
Right.
violence and bring them to justice, or just, I guess, assassinate them, and that's debatable.
Right.
But innocent people are innocent people, and that is true
Right.
regardless of what other people of their ethnicity did, and you can't just kill them. But I fault myself a lot for not realizing the importance of actually dealing with these specific claims, as well
Right.
as the beheaded babies and babies in ovens, because from my perspective, I knew a lot about the conflict, and I knew, what Israel was going to do. But what I didn't realize is that average Americans just don't really know anything about Palestinians or think they're bad. And so this just made it
Right.
like, to average Americans or average Westerners, like, these are heinous, heinous people. They're particularly
Yeah.
bad people. They're irredeemable. And we need to kill them all, as opposed to like, this was bad. This was a terrible thing. Hamas had some military aims. I
Yeah.
think that's clear. But it wasn't an attempt to, do this like extra bad killing
Right.
babies and
It
stuff.
wasn't, savagery for the sake of savagery, right?
Yes. And
There
that makes
were
it different. And I think that's what got most of the Western populations to sign off on what Israel did, at least
well,
for some
yeah,
time. And
they
yeah,
were manufacturing consent.
yeah,
And that's
yeah.
the point of pushing these lies, these exaggerations. And to be clear, most of them were wholesale fabrications. Okay,
Yes.
40 beheaded babies, babies in ovens, babies
There
on
were no babies
clotheslines.
were killed on October 7th, not
Well,
even
one
one,
baby,
let
her name
alone,
was Mia
oh, one.
Cohen,
Yes,
and
that, yeah.
she was 10 months old, and she was killed
And that's
with
horrible,
it is and her
horrible to
death
hear.
was on its own was very sad, right?
Yeah,
And I thought it's really tragic, like it is. I mean,
yeah.
it's heartbreaking, and
For some
it
reason, I thought
is.
she died like a few days later, but whatever. Whether it was on October
No,
7th or a few days later, you're
yes,
probably right. Yeah,
yeah, so she's in the crossfire, and we can link. I have it shared on my if you go to my page, if you search my X page, you can find her name. I've talked about her many times, and and I prayed for her. I prayed for her family, and her death really is a tragedy, and I won't ever take that away. But going back to this video, so this
yeah,
documentary that was put out, it was put out last November, right? It was highly produced, like I said. Something that struck me right away when I learned about this video is that you have to sign an NDA in order to see it. Okay.
wow,
So yeah, so you have to sign an NDA if you are so they're only screening for journalists and for uh politicians essentially, and people who like have influence, right? You can apply to see it, and
mm,
then if your application is accepted, then you have to sign an NDA in which you promise not to reproduce pictures of it. But I also believe that you may have to submit to submitting your work, like anything you're going to write about,
wow,
you have to submit to Israel first, under this is like under the guise of, well, we don't want you revealing certain details about the victims, right? But of course that's BS, right? They want to control the narrative, and that
right,
eh, no self-respecting journalist is going to sign that NDA,
right.
right?
Well,
uh,
so I watched Ali Abu Nima and someone else, I forgot who, on the Electronic Intifada break down all the evidence. So they had seen it. So somehow
okay,
so that's
so I could be
surprising to
wrong
me. Yeah. Yeah.
about the exact um details
Well,
of it.
they may have agreed to certain things, because I mean they also, I think, pretty convincingly dissected the evidence and made a strong case that this just didn't happen, and this was manufactured by an organization named Zaka, mostly Zaka. Other people too
Mhm.
were complicit.
Yeah, I believe I can't remember the name. I thought it was Michael Tracy, but it might not have been. But someone like him he said he refused to sign the NDA. They
Mm.
said they weren't going to do it
That
because
seems
they
like Michael Tracy.
yeah, because they, I could
Yeah,
be wrong on that, but I remember reading it and I was like, hold up, what do you mean you have to
that's
sign an
crazy.
NDA? This is ridiculous. And so that kind of tells you a little bit about the film.
Yeah.
But so Trump got his own private viewing of it. And supposedly, we don't know if this is true or not. Afterwards, this was yesterday when Netanyahu got there. Supposedly, he shed a tear. So learning that this morning, the way he acted last night kind of actually made a little bit more sense to me. And I am not making excuses, to be very clear. I have been extremely pissed with him all day. But to anybody that's ever been to like a Pentecostal tent revival, which I absolutely have been to one.
I've only seen them in the movies.
Well, they are just as emotional and emotionally manipulative as they are in the movies, and they really are like that. Everybody is like sweating and singing, and you start crying. Like women start crying. Like I was 15 and I
Yeah.
started crying. I don't even know why. It's a meant to be a highly emotional state, right? And these people who do these, they know what they're doing, and it's manipulative,
Right.
and it
Right.
makes you do things. I am like not the kind of person. I've never been the kind of person that like cries in public like that. And
Yeah.
I was like so emotional about sin and everything. And then the next day, and you say things like you say all of these weird things that you probably wouldn't have said, and then the next day you wake up and you're like, what the hell? It's like a weird hangover, and you're like, that was really weird.
Yeah.
Can't believe I really did that. I can't believe I like put myself out there like that. That's just odd. And and so it's funny. My grandma used to tell me about him. She grew up in southern Missouri, and it was like a thing. Like like they would have
Yeah.
them every couple months or whatnot, and everybody would get all of their sin out, and everybody's crying and emotional and singing. And then they have to do these things every few months to remind people that you can't be sinning all the time, and
Yeah.
and get people back in check. And so seeing Trump, I could see him going in, seeing that movie, and then being like emotionally overcome, and then like, okay, we got to solve this. Like we got to
Yeah.
solve it, and then just kind of saying stuff. And obviously, I don't think
Yeah.
all of this obviously wasn't off the cuff, right?
Yeah.
But I think some of it definitely was, and
Yeah.
I think that the backlash was pretty intense because you saw
Yeah.
the walk back today. I mean, the walk back was almost 100% on everything. It was
I
okay.
mean, even Lindsey Graham called it an interesting idea he wasn't
Yeah.
sure about. So
Yeah.
if Lindsey Graham.
I know. I think it was Lee Fang. He said this might be a miracle. Trump has actually
Yeah.
performed a miracle. And Lindsey Graham found the one conflict he wasn't
War
willing
he
to
didn't
put.
want.
Yep. And so, yeah, so we saw that today. We saw it start with Mike Walls out there saying, no, no, we're just throwing ideas out there. We're trying to inspire the Arab countries to put their ideas out there. And then we saw, I don't know if you saw Marco Rubio, but Marco Rubio clearly had
Yeah.
gotten an earful from pretty much probably everyone in the region, is what I could tell.
Yeah.
Because Marco Rubio, did you listen to his statement today? He pretty much said that he was almost guaranteeing a right of return, which is something I've
Wow.
never heard any of them say. He was like, no,
No.
we're just gonna, I thought Trump was very generous. We're gonna pay for it all to get cleared out, and then the people will have a nice home to come home to. I was like, okay. And then we saw Caroline Levitt say, no troops on the ground. We haven't committed to that, and we haven't committed to paying for anything, and we want other people to get involved.
Yeah.
So
I mean, one of the more convincing theories I heard, and I am kind of, I have to say, I've fallen to your wait and see category. I'm like a little reluctant to
yeah.
reach judgment because first of all, I know Trump is pretty brash, and just says things and they don't always stick. Second of all, I still haven't figured out entirely if he like is kind of like has a certain cleverness and sees down the road a few plays that I don't see, or if he's just crazy and stupid. I can't quite figure it out, and I change my mind every few days. But one of the more convincing theories I heard was basically it's a negotiating tactic, and he's like starting from this very crazy, what seems like a crazy extreme position, and sort of seeing how the Arab states respond, and Israel responds, and he's taking it from there. Others people have suggested that, I mean, Israel doesn't want this at all, that he's basically um, American control over the area is not what Israel wants, and that he's kind of trying to screw them over in an indirect way, which is an interesting theory too.
Yeah.
I don't.
As far as I'm concerned, Israel's the tail that wags the dog. I don't think they could care less about, whatever fake control. They have the control clearly. All right. When you
Yeah.
can get American states to pass laws against boycotting you, when American
Yeah.
states can't even pass laws against boycotting other American states,
Yeah.
clearly you're the ones in control. So I don't
Yeah.
I don't buy that for a second. I think that's crazy.
Let's quickly talk about that though, because I got some flack on Twitter yesterday. I tweeted the photo of, or it was actually a really short video of Trump pulling the chair out for Netanyahu, which
Yeah.
I don't think you've ever seen. I don't think Trump has ever pulled a chair out for Melania. I would be very surprised about that. But and I think it made a lot of people a little sick, including myself, just to
Yeah.
see our president be so subservient to this genocidal psychopath. Not to mention the smirking that happened before that. But I said something like, Americans, it's time to wake up and see that we're Israel's bitch. And a lot of people took issue with it and were like, even like people who agree with us on the ultimate issue. No, it's the other way around. It's America sees Israel, America's controlling Netanyahu. Which I obviously think is ridiculous, because it's pretty clearly not in America or Americans' interests to continue to fund and enable this genocidal regime that's making the entire world hate us and is very expensive. Well, we can't take care of people at home. But I mean, do you briefly want to explain why that's for people
Well,
who aren't
I
aware?
think that that's such a ludicrous statement, because if that were the case, they wouldn't need a $1 billion a cycle lobby, right? They wouldn't have to buy
Yeah.
our politicians if we were getting anything out of this. If this were in our interest whatsoever, they quite literally just wouldn't need to do all of the things that they do, right? It is totally turned around, and I get it that that makes people uncomfortable, because people don't like to talk about Jewish power, and it is for the most part. Not that all Zionists. I mean, you have some really powerful and even some billionaire Zionists who are not Jewish. Like I'm fully, Ken Griffith is a big one. You do have the Christian Zionist
Well,
lobby.
yeah, I was gonna say the Christian Zionist lobby, I do think, is a powerful voting
It's
contingent.
it's a powerful voting contingent in that aspect. I think that there's a solid debate to be made about how much of that voting block would get lost if
Mm.
you dropped necessarily like the Israel first stance. If you're like, yeah, we're going to stand with them, but we're always going to put America first. I don't know. I
Yeah.
genuinely think that most of those people would still vote Republican. I
Yeah.
just don't see them staying home. Um,
Yeah.
I actually don't think that they're more loyal to that subject than they are, say, abortion. And we saw the way
Yeah.
Trump was with abortion, and they still showed up.
Yeah.
So, um,
Yeah.
I take a lot of issue with putting too much power or
Yeah.
emphasis on that. It is mostly a very very wealthy, very few elite kind of Jewish supremacy issue, and I know that that makes people feel uncomfortable, but it is what it is. All right,
Yeah.
and you can't fight the problem if you won't identify the problem.
Yeah.
Right, you
Hey,
just
they
can't
just
counter
said
it.
that about anti-Semitism. They're now trying to get that Anti-Semitism Awareness Act passed. So we
Right,
can use
right.
that too.
I mean, if this were a Christian supremacist problem, no one would have any problem identifying
Yeah.
it. If it was a
Or
white
a Muslim
supremacist
supremacist.
or a
Yeah.
mess, yeah, exactly. No one would have any problem
Yeah.
identifying it. So I'm just not interested in your
Yeah.
complaints if
Yeah.
that's what it is. And so if it's just that you're taking the issue with me identifying them specifically as this is a Jewish issue, you know.
Yeah.
Again, if this were Jesuits, nobody has any problem,
Yeah.
calling out the Catholics.
Well, and
But
we're not making statements, certainly I'm not, about all Jews.
no,
I know a lot of Jewish people. I would say at least half my friends are Jewish, and they're all
yeah,
anti-Zionists. And
yeah.
certainly among young Jewish people, that's are overwhelmingly not supportive of Israel,
And I
which
don't
I
know
think
any Jews,
Israel's going to
so
find
I
out
don't.
soon.
Yeah, I don't
In
know any Jews. I
America,
don't have
yeah,
any issue either way. I don't take
yeah,
any actual opinion about them. Regardless, this is totally political, but it
yeah.
is there is a sense that God gave them this land, and that does come into play. I'm sorry, it just
Of
does.
course,
Actually, I'm
that's
not
yeah.
sorry. It is what it is, and so yeah. But going back to what were we talking about?
Trump.
Yeah, yeah.
Now I lost the thread there.
So
Um,
he walked it all back, but here's my thing. Um, if you ask me, Trump walked it back because the pressure, the backlash was intense, right?
oh,
It wasn't,
yeah.
it was off the charts. I was losing my ever loving mind yesterday. I woke up more pissed this morning, like just angry, angry.
Yeah.
And I didn't shut up, and I got a
We
lot of
were
flack
actually
for it.
supposed to record last night, but
Yeah.
Melissa was too upset.
I was like, I am gonna say something I'm gonna regret. If we record tonight, we gotta go tomorrow night. Because I was dropping F-bombs left and right. I was so mad because I felt such a betrayal at the thought of him putting troops on the ground, because he said that, we are gonna go in there, we're gonna own it, and we're
Yeah.
gonna clean it up, and we're gonna have to, detonate all these bombs. That's a military operation. An occupation is a military operation, right?
Yeah.
And just the thought of, and the thing is that I know the people of Gaza, like, that's their land. They're not
Yeah.
leaving voluntarily, which means it's a fight,
Yeah.
which means you're
Yeah.
sending our troops in for a fight. And this is
Yeah.
not our fight. And I felt like that was such a betrayal to us for him even just saying that. And the people were like, well, he didn't say. Yeah.
I am genuinely confused about what they're supposed to do in the meantime. Like, I mean, not only is it completely rubble, but it's also dangerous. I mean, they're explosives that haven't been detonated all over. So I worry about them, and so I'm like, especially the children, but everybody. So I don't know.
No,
I mean, the place looks like it's going to be uninhabitable for quite some time.
So it's going to take probably a multi-country effort, right? I do think you're going to have to elect an interim government, and it's not going to be able to be Hamas. Okay, it's just not. We have to be honest about that. So if it were me, if I were Marco Rubio, I would say we're going to have a multi-nation cleanup crew, essentially. So we're going to bring in troops from Egypt, the U.S., Qatar, UAE, the whole region, right? We're gonna number one, we're gonna elect a new government. We're going to set up a plan, and then everybody's going to come in, and we're going to detonate these bombs like we have to. We're going to clear out the rubble like we have to. Okay, and then we're going to start, and it's going to take years. It's probably going to take at least 3 to 5 years just to clear it all out, right? And in the meantime, I mean, you're going to set up tents. I don't know. I'm not saying it's.
I mean, if I were Marco Rubio, I would kick all the settlers out of the West Bank, make it clear that we're not giving Israel another dime. I mean, I wouldn't give Israel another dime, obviously, but any assistance on our part is contingent on kicking all the settlers out of the West Bank immediately, and then let the people from Gaza live there while it's being rebuilt, with a solid guarantee that they'll be able to return once it's been rebuilt. And I would make Israel do it too, the rebuilding.
Yeah. I don't think Israel's going to do it, and I'm actually not going to hold my breath on that. So I think the give from the rest of the world is, we're going to tell Israel, this is what you're going to do, and we're going to pay for it. And it's going to be everybody else paying for it. But this is the thing. This is what's going to happen. Yeah. Okay? And that's it. So that's the compromise. We're paying for it, but we're telling you what's happening. You don't get a say. Period. Yeah. You don't actually get a seat at the table anymore as far as this area is concerned, because of what you have done. Okay? Yeah. That's me. That's my compromise. We pay, you shut up. Yeah. And
Yeah.
And when I say we, I mean, everybody. I mean, I know Qatar at one point, was offering billions, and they're rich, all right? They
Yeah.
can
Yeah. Yeah.
pony
They
up
can
the
afford it.
money.
Yeah. 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 Since
And
they've not helped the Palestinians at all.
yeah, everybody can come to the table. We could put $100 billion into it, and we can make it happen. And yeah, so that's me. If I ruled the world, that's what I would do.
Yeah.
Um,
And
I was pleasantly surprised to see old Marco. I mean, he was scrambling. Somebody pointed out, our friend Asaf. He noted that Riyadh put out a statement. It was like 3 something in the morning
yeah.
there,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
were scrambling, right? They were
Yeah.
like, no, 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 because
Yeah.
Trump was like, don't worry, the Saudis, they don't even
Yeah.
require a Palestinian state anymore. And it was like, what the
Yeah.
this has
Yeah. Well,
never been their position publicly,
yeah.
anyways.
Yeah.
So that, to me, that was them. Definitely, it was just him, like, kind of getting really, getting that Pentecostal sweat going, getting
Yeah.
the sin
And as
out.
usual, Netanyahu, the gracious guest, brought his laundry. I actually don't know if he did this time, and he
I'm
also
sure
left
he
our
did.
president with a very thoughtful gift, which was a pager or 2 pagers in case
Two
he lost the
pagers.
gold one, I guess. Some people might say that was a veiled threat, or
Yeah,
not even veiled, not even
yeah.
veiled.
So we've seen Jewish organizations since last September that this is their thing, right? We've got people putting the pager emoji in their line and their name
Mm,
lines. We've got them. I've been offered, and you want me to mail you a pager? It's a
yeah,
threat. It is a threat. It's used
of
as a
course
threat.
it is.
We've seen Batar using this. I don't know if you saw that
Yeah,
disgusting video of them putting the going up
yeah.
to Dr.
Norman
Finkelstein.
Finkelstein.
Yep,
Yeah,
putting a pager in his pocket. Um,
yeah.
it is a
And
threat.
they've been threat. That's actually an update on that. So they I mean, they threatened me with the pager thing too.
Mm-hmm.
And they are still incessantly calling me. Not incessantly, that's an exaggeration. It's slowed down to like 4 or 5 calls a day.
We
But
gotta get
and
one of those recorded. Ugh.
so when I start recording, I have to use a different phone. They call me a lot while I'm at work or like in the middle of the night when I'm asleep and my phone's off. Um, so I mean, my plan was if like I'm here when my husband is, he'll record it with his phone. But they haven't like done it in the evening when that's a viable option because I've
Yeah,
been hitting record and I think they get an alert because then they
yeah,
don't say anything. And then they also threatened Peter Baynart, who's like the most nice, mild-mannered man ever. And
yeah.
I've watched his journey from being a pretty like liberal Zionist, being like, hey, something might be wrong here with how we treat Palestinians, to I read his book, I think it was called The Trouble with Zionism or something,
Mm-hmm.
like 15 years ago. And now he's just wrote an article in the Times that earned the ire of the Beitar and other groups because he said basically this isn't Zionism is no longer viable, and
Right,
states don't have a right to exist, people do, with saying that Israel
right.
doesn't have
Yeah,
a right to exist, people do. And when a state is killing people, it does not have a right to exist.
right, right. Yeah, I am of the position that unfortunately, for better or worse, might makes right. The problem with Israel, obviously, is that theirs is artificial might, right? Theirs is our
Yeah.
might. Okay,
Yeah.
and so it's an inorganic, unofficial, or artificial imbalance of power. If we did not back Israel, this problem would have been solved a long time ago, right? And it
Right.
probably would have been the dissolution of the quote unquote Jewish state, or a severe shrinking of the Jewish state, something like that. But there would have been peace a long time ago had the U.S.
Yeah.
not been this outsized influence in the region.
Right. I mean, I can't say I subscribe to a might makes right philosophy myself. I definitely believe in like fundamental human rights, and
Mhm.
no moral government should violate them. But the point you make that I very much agree with is I think it's inorganic because no matter what they do, they continue to receive money from us.
Right.
And so they're not like accountable in the way that a normal government is to the people there, and there are other like dynamics that are just highly unusual. But I
Right. Well,
think, if Israel treated Palestinians the way that it does, and it wasn't receiving unconditional aid from us, it would be facing international condemnation, and so it wouldn't be able
oh,
to continue to do
absolutely.
that. So yeah, so I think I agree with you in the end result.
Right. When I say like might makes right,
Yeah.
it's more so that it just is what it is, right? Like that
Right.
it's the way the chips fall, even though
Yeah.
it's not always it. Obviously, I don't think that that's morally correct all the time,
Right.
but I'm a realist in that I understand that that's
Yeah.
the problem. Obviously, is that it's not natural. Their might is artificial, and this problem would have been solved a long time ago had it not been for our constant intervention in the
Right,
region.
exactly. Because I mean, now most people, I think, in the world, and even most countries, certainly in the global South, recognize, this idea of human rights, and they would
Definitely.
not continue to support this. And I mean, I think a lot of people aren't buying Israeli products. They don't travel there.
Hmm.
There are, a number of countries who are promising to uphold the international law warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant, and so those things would, combined with other factors, would ultimately result in, I think, severe economic decline, so that
Oh,
Israel couldn't continue to do this.
if it were not for the U.S., Israel would be an absolute pariah state, right?
Yeah.
You countries all over the world would be boycotting, if not for the threat of the US, sanctioning them or us using our own economic might for the benefit of Israel. And
Yeah.
so instead what we see is just a lot of, big talk, chest beating, from world leaders. I think we saw Silva come out today out of Brazil talking about, oh, this is a genocide, yada, yada. And it's like, okay, but you're still doing trade. If you
Yeah.
really think that this is a genocide, which I do, then why are you not trading? Why have you
Yeah.
not stopped your trade? And
Yeah.
that's another thing about the Gulf states. They're still sending their oil,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
And everybody's like, well, it's because the U.S. make. And I'm like, you know, you can say, yeah, the U.S. is a big is a is big and bad, but those guys could all get together collectively. And what are
Yeah.
we gonna do? What
Well,
are we
and
gonna do?
that's why the Hague group gave me hope. I mean, if they continue to expand, I think we talked about that last time, the 9 countries that have sort of banded together to enforce international law against Israel. If that continues to grow, I think that, and I think that's probably the idea. I think those 9 countries alone probably won't be able to achieve what they want, especially because none of them are. I mean, South Africa, I guess, is influential, but most of them are pretty Honduras. No
Right.
disrespect for
Right,
Hondurans. I'm
right.
sure it's a beautiful country, but I don't think that they're a major player in the global economy.
God
So
bless them, though.
yeah,
They're putting up anybody that stands up to that maniacal state is just has my eternal respect. Any
yeah,
leader, willing to take the flag, they just do. I mean, God bless them.
yeah,
I certainly will never forget the people where people stood on this issue.
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
think anybody who actually cares about it, I don't think we will ever forget. And now
yeah,
when I come across people and they're trying to pontificate about something to me, especially on X, I immediately check their page because that it is
yeah,
the litmus as far as I'm concerned.
yeah,
Where were you on
yeah,
an actual genocide? Because I,
yep,
I just don't respect your opinion if you were on the wrong side.
yeah.
Not anymore.
No, I'm
You know,
or if you couldn't be bothered to speak out.
right, right.
I
I know.
mean,
I
I
was
do have
listening.
empathy for people who, need their jobs and would get fired from
Mhm.
them. That is different. But
I understand that, and I agree
yeah,
100%. But there are certain things that you can say still to
yes,
signal,
exactly.
and
Yes,
and uh, and so some if people don't say anything at all,
yeah,
then I'm usually like you kind of know, okay, this is probably something
yeah,
more personal, especially if they talk about other stuff. It was funny.
yeah.
I bought a book about lobbying. I wanted to hear like this, foreign lobbying, and I'm listening, and I'm about like 2 chapters in, and I'm like, something isn't right here. This feels odd. This feels like a distraction, right?
Mm.
And it's a book by his name is like Casey Michel, Michel. And whenever I'm talking about the Israeli lobby, very often Zionists will come in and they're like, why don't you talk about these foreign lobbies, right? So I'm in the process, before I drop my APAC thread, I'm going to drop a thread about foreign lobbies, right? I'm going to address every single thing, so I can basically just head it all out. And then the second they come in my comments, I'm just going to link them to that thread that I've already written talking about all of this. And so I've read one book, and then I was on to this next one that got recommended to me, and I'm about 2 chapters in, and I'm like, hold, this guy, this sounds like a lot of talking points I've already heard online, right? And what do you know? I go to his page and I look him up, and he's got nothing. He's got maybe 2 tweets. He's got 34,000 tweets, and he's got like 2 about the Israeli lobby.
Wow. Yeah.
Big old red flag.
Red
Then
flag.
I type in
Yeah.
anti-Semitism, and
Yeah.
he's got a lot to say about anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so this is a distraction. And I listened to one more chapter, and then I was like, you know what? This is propaganda. This one's going back.
Yeah, if you can't talk about the elephant in the room, then.
Right.
But and also, so on this related subject, actually, I think we should talk about the. You're probably aware of this, the task force that's now been set up, to the anti-Semitism task force that's been set up pursuant
I haven't
to Trump's
followed
executive
it
order.
too much.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clearly they're the idea is to investigate universities that don't adequately address anti-Semitism, which of course is defined, as everybody knows. They don't define it in this executive order or the task force memo, but I think it's pretty clear that the government is using the definition that includes criticism of Israel. So of course, and they have 6 universities they're going to focus on initially: University of Michigan, a few others. And of course, as everybody knows, the mere idea of an investigation is of course going to prompt universities to clamp down on protests or any kind of pro-Palestine speech. And that's the whole point of this, is to intimidate people into shutting up while they continue to bomb the West Bank now that they've taken a little break in Gaza. That's going on too. We haven't really talked about that, but they're killing people in the West Bank now, bombing entire blocks in the city I'm named after, Jenin. I think it's just egregious, the fact that this administration is kowtowing to the demands to take away our First Amendment rights, basically, in order to placate these people. I don't even know what to call them. The people who want to continue to kill children and do it without anyone being able to stand up and protest it. So,
Israelis, that's what we call them.
Yeah. Well, not all Israelis, but
well, it's something like 87% is the last poll I saw.
It's a shocking number. I mean, this is what happens when you have an entire society built around a victimhood complex, and the idea that they're the only people who are entitled to be victims, and they can do whatever they want to anyone else in order to feel the slightest bit safer all of the time. But we could probably both go on about that for a long time.
Yeah, it's what happens when you instill people with this idea that at any moment the whole world is going to lose its mind and turn into rabid, murderous anti-Semites. It is what, and of course that's certainly a topic for another day, but it's something that should get talked about more, because number one, it's just not true, right? It's just not. People are not born with like some kind of gene that makes them hate Jewish people. That is not a thing. Okay. Are there anti-Semites who hate Jewish people for irrational, made up, crazy reasons? Of course, absolutely. And those people, we should guide them. We should, of course, pray for them, and we should also correct them harshly, right? But the idea that is like this thing that's just going to happen and the whole world's going to get swept up is nonsensical, and it is deeply damaging to tell yourself that,
Yeah,
because
and
it
to tell your
leads,
children that,
and
to tell your children
to tell your children that. I personally view that as child abuse, as far as I'm concerned, because it is psychological abuse, right? That is very scary as a child, to grow up thinking that at any time the world's going to turn on you like that. It is cruel to tell your children and to make them feel unsafe. Children need to feel
Yeah.
safe. um
Yes.
they do.
Yeah,
It
it's
is
the
literally
only thing that
like the, Maslow's like hierarchy of needs. It's like safety is like number two. Okay. And
yeah,
so no, it's wrong. And
yeah,
I have no problem, and I will tell anyone that it is
yeah,
absolutely wrong. And
and
we
it's,
see the
and it's
results.
yeah, and it's a vicious cycle because what happens is it creates the oppression that we're seeing now, and then of course
Mm-hmm.
that causes people who are kept under the oppression, the Palestinians specifically, to commit acts of violence at some point because
Well,
people
they
want to
lash
be
out.
free and not live under
Mm-hmm.
an occupation. So of course they lash out, and then that confirms this idea that everybody's just anti-Semitic, and we
Yeah.
have to do this to people in order to stay safe. So it's a vicious cycle, and until
It's a
that cycle is broken,
it's a
yeah,
self-fulfilling prophecy too, right? Like
yeah,
there's certainly plenty of psychology on that, about provoking
yeah,
provoking actions in people, reactions in people that you have already predicted, and then of course it
yeah,
fulfills what you
yeah,
already thought that they were going to do. And we see this all the time. I've experienced it online. I've experienced it in real life. Anybody that's ever dealt with crazy people, yeah, like
yeah.
when I'm sure when you worked at, for criminal defense, when I worked for a criminal defense attorney, you deal with insane people sometimes.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Yes, you do.
you see it, and
Yeah.
it's really wild to kind of see that human psychology play out like that. So,
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
I actually listened to a really interesting podcast this morning by it was Chris Hedges interviewing Gabor Mate, and for people who don't know, Chris
okay.
Hedges is a war correspondent, very, very, very left.
Very
So I don't
left.
agree with him on a lot of like
I know.
not
I've listened
everything,
to like two of his
but
books, and I'm
he's
always like,
very yeah. So, but he's great on a lot of things. And then Gabor Mate
hmm
is a psychoanalyst or psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust as an infant.
hmm
And he specializes in trauma and treating trauma. And it
hmm
actually, I have to say, like, I struggle with my anger sometimes towards Israelis who the majority, not the Israelis who aren't okay with this, but the Israelis who are down with it, and it seems like it's a lot of them according to them.
Yeah.
And like I saw a video of a woman yesterday, you may have seen it too, she was on TV talking, saying like, just kill them all, just kill them all, babies, children, I don't care, not my problem, just kill them all.
Right.
And that stuff makes me angry, and especially
Which
because
is a
I've
total
heard, yeah,
psychological disconnect, right? It's
it
just
is, yeah, yeah. So
kind of
listening to the
apathy. Yeah.
yeah, no, exactly. So listening to the podcast where Gabor Mate was explaining how this is a trauma response to basically what we were just talking about gave me,
hmm
some empathy. And that was like a nice, it was a break for me from just feeling kind of anger a lot of the time.
Oh yeah, because it is overwhelming, especially if
Yeah.
you're on our side. If you have, especially being on the right, for me, and I know you have a lot of right wing followers because of
Yeah.
COVID and stuff like that, and so it's been a struggle for them. They like us
Yeah.
for a lot of our commentary. They really like us, and then on the other side, I mean, they hate us, and you might even be
Yeah.
listening to this, and you might, you might really disagree. I don't know. If you're still listening after 40 minutes, but I get it. I do. And so I struggle
Yeah.
with that. I struggle with showing patience for those people. And
Yeah.
I write a lot of mean things, and then I delete them, and sometimes I post them.
Mhm.
And But yeah, I do struggle, and I think that we all have to try a little harder to have empathy, even though it's very, for me, it's very, very hard, because I'm thinking like we're 16 months into just the mass
Yeah.
slaughter and the
Yeah.
dehumanization of an entire population of people. And I see
Yeah.
these videos of these babies. I watched the most precious video today of these little girls saying, "This is our land and we're not going anywhere," and it like choked me up, because I love America like that. And like, if
Yeah.
somebody came and tried to tell me like, you can't live here anymore, this isn't your land anymore, I
Yeah.
would feel exactly like it would surge through my veins, exactly like
Yeah.
them. I could
I mean,
feel it in my bones, you know?
it's crazy that I know people who say, "Well, what's the big deal? Why can't they just go to Lebanon or Syria or Jordan?"
Right. It's
I mean, because that's where they live. They've lived in that
this their
land, the
land.
communities. I mean,
Hmm.
most Americans, I don't think, can even imagine, because people don't live in the same area as long, and they're not in
Hmm.
communities long. Most people, not everybody. But even in the limited time, like imagine if you just had to move somewhere you had never been, to a different country.
Hmm.
Maybe they speak English, but it's different, away from your
Right.
community, away from your house, away from
Well, the thing is that
everything you've known.
you got to think, people, the problem for most people is like, if you had to move within, we imagine like if we had to move within America, right? Like if you had to
Right,
move from
right,
North Carolina to Florida, what would be the big deal? Because you're still in America, okay?
right.
They would still be an American. It's, I think for people who don't understand, it's because they've just never actually been forced to be an outsider, right?
Yeah,
To
yeah,
go from being a Palestinian to now you are a Palestinian, in you're a refugee in Egypt.
yes,
Okay, you're
yes.
not an Egyptian. All right, yeah, it's
And
just across the border, but it's a whole
but it's a
different country.
different place. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, these people live in very tight knit communities. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
often with like extended family, and to uproot all of that, and they're very attached to the land in a way that Americans just could
Yep.
never understand, because
See.
they live
Yeah.
there for generations. It's,
Yep.
it's an almost spiritual connection to the house, the land that your parents
Oh,
raised you in, or
absolutely. I think a
whatever.
lot of Americans do feel that exact same feeling. They just haven't put themselves
Yeah.
into the other, into the Palestinian shoes. And
Yeah.
and again, why? Because they have been subjected to the most intense propaganda for at
Yeah.
least the last 60 years that any
Yeah.
human civilization has ever been subjected to.
Yeah.
And I do have to remind myself constantly that Americans are so heavily propagandized on this very
Yeah.
specific issue that we have to be patient, especially with the boomers. I don't have a
Yeah.
lot of patience with
I've
them
given up on them.
sometimes. Yeah.
They're whatever.
I don't
We
know.
just have to wait for them to.
I got some boomers in my mentions, and God bless them. I love y'all, okay, because y'all do give me hope. And I mean, it's
There
funny.
might.
I got some radical boomers in my mentions, and I love them, okay.
Yeah.
But for the most part, unfortunately, the boomers have been subjected more than any other
Yeah.
generation ever to
Yeah.
the craziest propaganda you
Yeah.
can imagine. And it's just been nonstop intense. When it started with the Holocaust narrative, and then it goes to, you inject, you gotta think boomers were like what, like in their late 30s, early 40s, when
9/11.
9/11 happened. And
Yeah.
then holy crap, it's like a
Yeah.
whole nother layer. And this is the largest group in our country, and they are just, for better or worse, uh, they have a hard time letting go of this
Yeah.
idea. Yeah. I
Yeah.
actually have a lot of thoughts on that. I'll have to send you guys a thread. Maybe I'll share one that I read very early on, talking about why boomers are so attached to Israel. And it actually did help
Yeah.
explain a lot to me
I
about
should read
this.
that, because I can't
Yeah.
quite understand it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and my parents obviously don't fall into that
Right.
category. So,
Yeah.
uh, but anyway, well, it's been a great episode.
Yes.
I,
Yes. Hopefully everybody enjoys,
yes,
and
and we will be
don't.
back.
Yeah, you can go to
Yeah.
tent revivals, all right? It's good for you sometimes, okay? Just try to keep it in mind. Don't get too swept away,
Yeah.
Or do it. It's not that big of a deal,
Well,
So
we'll be back soon with more on Macron and
Yes,
probably more
Macron.
on the Middle East.
Of
Most
course, of
likely, there'll be
course.
updates.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
But
stay
definitely Bridget
safe.
Macron, y'all. I'm telling you,
Yes.
this story, if you are not watching Candace, you have to go watch her. You have to. Okay. She's doing such a phenomenal job laying this out. It's a complex story, it spans decades,
Yeah.
and she's really doing it right. I've learned my lesson in certain areas about complex stories like this. You have to dole it out very
Yeah.
slowly, to especially when there's a lot of players involved, right? And
Yeah. And it's a nice break from
it
the
is.
the
It is.
tragedy of the Gaza situation. So I find it
Yeah.
fun to dig into this a little bit.
Yeah.
So we'll be back.
Okay. Bye, guys.